Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Alyse Nelson. I'm president and CEO of Vital Voices, and I'm so thrilled to be back here at the Women's Forum to celebrate 20 years. This gathering has been so critical to Vital Voices over the years. I've been here almost every single gathering. So it's wonderful to be back, and particularly as we're celebrating this critical anniversary, not just of 20 years of the Women's Forum, but as you just heard, 30 years since the historic United Nations Fourth World Conference on Women, where the founder of Vital Voices, Hillary Clinton, then First Lady, said women's rights are human rights are women's rights. Unfortunately, 30 years later, we are still trying to get there. We are still not there. Women around the world, of course, do not have equal rights with men, but we're making progress. We're having setbacks, but we continue to make progress. I'm thrilled to have with me an extraordinary panel of leaders, women who were there and women who are taking the torch and leading it forward. So let me introduce them. First, we have Laura Liswood. She's Secretary General of the Council of Women World Leaders. We have Yakin Erturk. She is the former UN Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women from Turkey. And finally, Nika Kovac. She's founding director of the Research Institute of the 8th of March, which is a nonprofit organization using storytelling and advocacy to gain gender equity and women's rights around the world. So let's get started. I want to turn first to you, Yakin, because you were critically involved in the United Nations and in the lead up to the Beijing Women's Conference. Why should we care? Why 30 years later are we still talking about this historic gathering? Why is it important to the larger framework and, you know, the roadmap for global women's issues?
Well, thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. Of course, when we talk about Beijing Conference, let's remember that behind it lies 80 years of partnership between the women of the world and the United Nations. UN provided women with space for policy making, and women, with their engagement, feminized UN language and institutions. And by the time we came to Beijing, it was clearly acknowledged that women's issues are not private, but they are political. Therefore, needed to be taken into consideration in policy making. And it opened a whole new door for how states responded to women's issues. I consider the Beijing Conference as an incredible moment of mobilizing political will and resources, which went beyond the conference itself to four corners of the world. I met women, for example, in highlands of Guatemala in 2003. She said to me, an indigenous woman, "I didn't know I had rights before. Now I do know." And I said, "How did you know?" Well, she knew because of the little money that was made available by the UN that held a training session in her little village. So it had an impact of a new awakening throughout the world. But let's also remember that the Beijing Conference also holds the seeds of opposition, which we are seeing today as a transnational anti-gender movement across civilizations that stand to threaten the progress that we have made.
Wow. So if we think back to the UN Women's Conference, as many of you may know, we signed on to something called the United Nations Platform for Action to improve the lives of women in 12 critical areas of concern, everything from education, political rights, health. That, sadly, is still the most progressive document signed by 189 countries to date. 30 years later, it is still the most progressive document. So, Laura, I want to come to you. You were also in Beijing. And I know for you, you as Secretary General now of the Council of Women World Leaders, at the time you were traveling the globe with the question of what would happen if we had a woman president in the United States. You were traveling the globe and interviewing women presidents. You came to Beijing, we've moved forward, we've moved backwards, headwinds, tailwinds. Where are we now? How do we move forward?
Well, thank you very much, Alyse, and thank you for the organizers letting me speak at this incredibly good forum. I've have attended previously, and it's always a wonderful event to go to. Yeah, I think that as I look back on the Beijing, and I went to Beijing to show the rough cut of my documentary of the interviews with the heads of state and government, I had come away from that journey realizing that I kept hearing so many common themes from the women, that things that they had experienced. And it actually got a little amusing because I would say, oh, Prime Minister so-and-so, don't worry, Prime Minister so-and-so had the exact same problem. You know, and then I realized that if you're the only O in a room full of X's and things start happening to you and you don't have any other O's to talk to, you begin to think it's something wrong with you as an individual. But by talking to other O's, you begin to realize that it's social dynamics, that it's how society views women, it's the things that happen to all women. And that's what Beijing, I think, was the first catalyst of. The ability for women to talk to other women, say, yeah, we're experiencing the exact same issues, realizing it wasn't personal to them, it was what society was doing. And it was what were the laws or the lack of the laws, et cetera. So I really find that was a very important first step for women. And I think as we continue, you know, this has just gotten more and more engagement of women because, you know, there's a great phrase, Alyse, you've heard me say this, a great phrase, women are like snowflakes. One alone may melt, but together we can stop traffic. Yeah. So, you know, the togetherness is a very important part of what it is that we're doing here. So I think that we are moving forward, and yes, we have some resistance to us. I mean, Thucydides said people change for 3 reasons, and 3 reasons only. Fear, self-interest, or the Greek term honor, which incidentally means vision in today's language, which is why I'm glad we're sitting in the vision room. You know. So how do we get people to change? Or what is it that people fear about changing? And I think we need to be very clear about that as we continue to push forward, because we are not completely done. This journey continues. We're on an arc of history, and we're at a point now where we're feeling a great deal of resistance because we're demanding equality. You know? And for some people, they don't realize it, but equality feels like a takeaway. Because if you've been overrepresented, and all of a sudden we're saying, no, you have to be equally represented, that's a takeaway. You know? And I think we have to realize that as I think we need to be much better at using the tools of the future for the problems of today. I'll leave it at that for now. We'll continue this.
Thank you, Laura. So 30 years ago, I was a 21-year-old college student. Now, think about this. 30 years ago, there was no Google. So if you wanted to understand global women's issues, you had to go there. You had to sit down with women. And that's, for me, why Beijing was so powerful. Going there, sitting, learning from 55,000 women activists and leaders from around the world. That caught the fire in the belly for me, led me to go and work at the White House for Hillary Clinton and then State Department with Madeleine Albright. And that's where we founded Vital Voices. Today, we've worked with more than 47,000 women leaders across 188 countries. One of those leaders is Nika Kovac. Nika is, I think, well, first off, let me say Nika was 2 at the time of the Beijing Women's Conference, but she really represents this rising generation of women who doesn't want to wait in line to make change and who doesn't necessarily want to use the traditional methods. One of the great things that happened in Beijing was that the recognition of reproductive justice. But as we know, in my country, certainly the United States, we've had a huge rollback of rights. When I was born in 1974, I was born into having reproductive rights. Today, my daughter does not have those same rights. Nika is leading an extraordinary campaign here in Europe, and I want her to first talk about that campaign This woman has brought the Me Too movement to Slovenia, the country where she lives. She has made extraordinary reforms across climate, across violence against women, and now reproductive justice. So Nika, please tell us about your campaign.
Yeah, hi to all of you. So a couple of years ago, I was living 1 year in the United States, and I was living there when they took away the reproductive rights from women. And I was shocked how sad they were, like how hopeless they felt, and I became obsessed with this idea that Europe should not become US. And I think I was very right at that moment. And with my best friend, Sara Duria, who is from here, we decided to start a European campaign to protect abortion on the level of European Union. And we found out that you can do this if you propose a change to European Commission and if you collect 1 million signatures in all the countries of European Union. And we thought, okay, this will be super easy. We will just collect the signatures and then change will happen. But it was the hardest campaign in my life because the systems of European Union are done in a way that you don't change them. But after a year, we didn't collect just 1 million signatures, but 1,200,000 signatures. And it is basically a campaign which created movements in every single country in European Union. It's people who are high school students who are collecting signatures on the street, grannies in Germany who organized, it's religious groups, it's people all across the political spectrum who basically believed that women should not die because of restrictive abortion laws. And all the people said to us at the beginning of the campaign, you're crazy, you will never make it. But 2 days ago, we won the first vote in the European Parliament. We have one more vote to go, and I really believe we can do something big.
Wow, wow. It gives me so much hope every time I spend time with this woman. Truly, truly. For all the incredible work that she does, she has experienced tremendous online attacks and offline attacks against her. And one of the things that we're finding at Vital Voices around the world is that this is a trend. Violence against women, unfortunately, is one of those issues where we don't seem to be making much progress. In fact, if you look across the world, it is the one issue that unites us. No country can say it's free from it. No woman anywhere across any cultural background, religion, socioeconomic status can say, I am safe from violence against women. And when we were in Beijing, I don't think we could have imagined how these new tools, technology, could be used as a weapon against women. Do you know that there has been a 3,000% rise in deepfake porn targeting women leaders to shame us, to silence us, to push us off the leadership path? This woman, for her courageous work, has received death threats. I want to turn to you, Yakin, because as the Special Rapporteur for Violence Against Women, this is an issue that you have looked at, worked on, traveled around. Is it true that it's a problem that's gotten worse, or is it just that we know more about it today than we did 30 years ago?
Well, that's a very difficult question, of course. But let me just say that I was very impressed listening to Nikki. What connects the two women of two different generations is the 30 years ago what happened in Beijing. I think Beijing was something that spilled over to generations and generations of women, even though she has not been to Beijing and probably may not have much idea what went on there, but she's a product of what happened there. And I think it's the intergenerational relationship continues. With respect to violence, I think until 1990s, violence was strictly a private matter. Vienna Conference in 1993 acknowledged, thanks to the women's insistent movements lobbying for this, that violence against women is a human rights and equality issue. And since then, an incredibly comprehensive regime has emerged within the UN and at the regional level, dealing with the issue of violence. So we have accomplished much. Many countries have acknowledged things such as marital rape, which would have been unimaginable, domestic violence. All these terminologies even didn't exist. These became matters of crime and punishment. So we have gone ahead considerably. However, today when we look, there seems to be an increase in violence and new forms of violence emerging, particularly at the digital level. And just recently, the attack that was made on the Mexican president, it may be an individual act, but it's still continuation of that patriarchal notion of how women, no matter what status she may hold in society, may be a target of such attacks. So we are facing serious situations. What I think is important here, and I think during COVID, we saw a new awakening as feminists. We thought we had made it as middle-class women. We thought we succeeded in 30 years of struggle in breaking the glass ceiling. But came COVID with the care crisis, and we all went back home as primary caretakers. So I think this has made us realize that we were responding to violence at the surface level, that it was a personal trait of the perpetrator or a cultural matter, whereas it lies very deeply rooted in patriarchal division of labor, which puts women as a caregiver, primary caregiver. And I think we need to reconceptualize this. And at this point, we need probably to revisit our strategies. Women are no longer willing, the good news is that women are no longer willing to be the shark observers of patriarchal capitalism. They want to maintain and move forward with their rights and freedoms, but we need a basis to support this. We cannot count on states anymore. The UN is on slippery ground, and these were two areas which provided us with the support we needed. Today, I want to call on something which I'm pronouncing for the first time here. I think we need a purple capital. So I call on the working woman, but businesswoman of the world to unite for a more caring world for people and nature. And this will naturally link purple capital with green technology. So we are at a stage in history for the advancement of women where we really need to have a greater focus on the issue of care and work towards a new social state which puts care not as a commodity, not as something belonging to the female sex, but an ethical value and a right. And we need to develop our capital to support this.
I love that. Purple capital. Great. So one of the reasons why these global conferences were so powerful is that they enabled women to have a common language. So in Nairobi, when women gathered in 1985, there was no word at the time for domestic violence. That was one of the outcomes of that gathering. You have to name it, right? Before you can then advocate and say, wait, that's happening to you, that's also happening to me, and that's happening to so many women in my community, right? And then to create and organize to create a law, right? And then to work to implement that law. And so it's a journey, but also to have the platform for action that was that roadmap to hold governments accountable was so, so critical. Laura, I want to bring you back into the conversation because as much as we've seen that we've slipped backwards, when we look over 30 years, there are great strides forward, right? We have at least double the number of women who serving as heads of state around the world. Did we ever think we would see what we've seen now in Japan, for example? I don't think we had ever thought that would be possible, or certainly in my country. We've come close, but not yet. We've doubled the number of women actually who have served in parliaments around the world, still too low, but we've doubled that number. Where do you see progress happening? Where do you see setbacks? And certainly this is against the backdrop of the fact that in 1995, we had the highest rate of democracy around the world. We have slid backwards big time, and that has impacted women. 72% of the global population lives under authoritarian rule today. That is a 50% increase in the last 10 years. And autocracies thrive by putting women in their place. So Laura, against that backdrop, with progress forward, with backslides, where do we go? Where are these sort of short circuits and opportunities to move things forward?
A small question.
Yeah.
You know, first let me highlight a point around this violence, particularly around digital violence. The Interparliamentary Union indicates that women parliamentarians, for example, are 9 times more likely to be digitally harassed, digitally threatened than men politicians. You know, so one of the issues is sometimes you get a false equivalency. Someone will say, but that's happening to men too. Well, not exactly. You know, it's the issue of possibility and frequency. It's possible it's happening to men. The frequency at which it happens to women is far greater. So sometimes you have to watch that kind of thing. It's like, yes, it is happening to men, and yes, that should be decried, but the fact that it is having a real chilling effect, and I particularly see it around women presidents and prime ministers, either that people aren't stepping into that level of position, or they're only taking 1 term, and they're stepping out after 1 term, and that's really problematic, you know. So, yeah, I'd certainly, if I had to say anything, I'd love to see as many women as possible run for office. You know, I'd like to see a few more self-indulgent female billionaires run for the presidency, you know, in the United States, you know, slightly joking. But we do need more people because these efforts, and some of them are not just individual efforts, they're organized efforts to drive women out of the public sphere, you know, and so we need to push that back. We need to continue to be in the public sphere. We need to continue to run for office or to take on roles of leadership in various places, whether it's the business sector, the not-for-profit sector, or government sector. I think that, you know, I think there's an advantage. I've written a book called The Elephant and the Mouse. And the concept is if you're the elephant in the room, what do you know about the mouse? And the answer is not much. But if you're the mouse in the room, what do you know about the elephant? The answer is everything. Right? Because you have to, right? So the dominant group doesn't know very much about the non-dominant groups, but the non-dominant groups know an enormous amount about dominant groups. And so I think we should use that knowledge, you know. We should use that we understand the dominant group far better, the overrepresented group, far better than they understand the underrepresented group.
Yeah. Women can use that as an advantage. I mean, we think about how, yeah, you've got to know everything about the elephant as the mouse. And I feel that Laura is describing you as she talks about that because as you've been attacked online, you've used different methods. And I think that's what's so interesting about the way women lead is leading from a place of wanting to collaborate, wanting to innovate and do things differently. We have the advantage in many ways of historically being left out. That sounds bad, but actually it means we have to do and think differently. Talk about how you've done that, some of the interesting tools and methods that you've used to move forward.
Yeah, so I had this unique privilege to feel everything on my skin. I have more than 15 cases of death threats on the court. People are admitting that they want to kill me. I was beaten up on the streets of Slovenia. Just 3 days ago, they cut down all the wires of the cars in our office. But basically, we know that they are doing this because they want to shut us down. They are not doing this because of us personally, but because we are a critical voice screaming for a different society. And the only solution to win them is to be louder than them and not to be shitty as them. So what we believe is that we need to basically flood the online presence, flood everything with kindness and with justice and with solidarity. So we developed with our retired volunteers, women who have a lot of time on Facebook, sometimes something which is called like Love Army. Whenever someone is attacked by authoritarians, we call those women to just comment the posts of the people who are attacked with love and with courage, because we know they are doing this to feel afraid and alone and to stop doing this. And the only reason that you don't stop fighting in that kind of situations is if you feel that you're a part of the community. So I really, really believe that the only way to stop them is to organize, to post 60 posts per day, to be louder and not step back when they attack you. And whenever you see someone else in the same position, stand with the person, because solidarity is the ultimate glue for a change.
Wow. Wow. As much as things look bleak, I mean, again, you give me so much hope for the future. And I think, you know, we listen to you talk, you lead differently. And I think that the difference that women bring is so needed right now. Women are more collaborative, inclusive, more cause-driven as leaders. We have that ability to find commonality across differences, and that's where you make change, real sustainable change. The other piece that I'd say that gives me hope right now is the fact that by 2030, women will control 50% of the wealth. And I know there's going to be further discussions here on that topic. The great wealth transfer of trillions upon trillions of dollars, 70% is going to end up in the hands of women. Why should we care? Because women invest in companies and organizations of purpose, and they invest in the things that impact their lives. So as much as we see rollback, I see opportunity. We need to stay focused, we need courage, and we need conviction, which I know is what this gathering is all about. We've got a few more minutes here, and I just want to go, each one of you, and ask, what is giving you hope right now? And what is a call to action for this group to stay courageous, stay convicted? Laura, you want to start?
Kind of hoping for someone else to be. What gives me hope? Well, for one thing, the two panelists sitting on this, and you with Vital Voices, sitting here talking about what they're actually doing to create the kind of change that we need, and the courage that that takes is amazing. You know, I think that what is really important to me is that we have pressure at both the top level, the highest levels of power, including money, you know, and then at the grassroots level. Filipino women have this great phrase. They say to cook rice cakes, you need heat at the top and heat at the bottom. You know? And so having that, you know, being conscious of that, and the very fact that we can even articulate these kinds of things and using those kind of tools of the future. I mean, Tacitus said that the worst crimes were dared by a few, willed by more, and tolerated by all. So change is the exact same way. You know, it's dared by a few. It's people who have courage, you know, to dare to do something. And then it's going to be willed by people in this room who agree with it, who can put their resources to it, who can put their voice to it, who can help champion these things. And then ultimately, the kinds of things that the goals that we want will be accepted by all. You know? So that's what gives me courage.
Wonderful. Yakin. Yeah.
Well, courage, of course, contains rage. And my reaction to the injustices of the world was always rage, which once I come to terms with, gives me courage to move on. And of course, I get that by looking at how individual and women and collectively, under the worst of circumstances, survive. Look at Gaza. Mere survival has become a mode of resistance for women in Gaza. I cannot but respect this and feel encouraged by it. Look at Iran. Women who, for since 1979 have been living under very severe conditions. And if Iranian women had not been so resilient, I think the Mullah regime could have gone much farther. And they paid a heavy price, but the whole movement of the Iranian woman, Jinjian Azadi, became something that mobilized Iranians across the board. So there is hope in women standing individually and collectively in resisting oppression of all sorts. So I think this is something we can build our hopes on and be all courageous and hopeful for the future.
Yeah. Nika. Yeah.
So a couple of years ago, we were doing environmental campaign in one of the most conservative cities in Slovenia. And they are super against abortion, against LGBT rights, against everything that we believe in the organization. And I had an event very close to this city, and it was in the media that people said they will kill me there. So I came to the event, and all those conservative men from this small city were sitting in the first row. And I came to them and I was like, guys, go away. This is an event about abortion. You don't believe in this. You don't need to be there. And they looked at me and they said, you know what? You stood up for us, for environment, and we are here to protect you. And we will collect the signatures because we will not allow that anyone does anything to you. And this kind of solidarity, which comes back, is something which gives me hope.
Thank you all so much. I want to end us with one last word from Rumi, who said that if you look around and you feel that there's only darkness, as many of us do today, look again, because you may be the light. These women are the light. We are the light. Let's go out there and make the impossible possible for women in our world. Thank you.